Hello folks, welcome to the channel. DJ here again. What I want to talk to you today is about Britain has floundered. From being a centre of world politics and power to being a poor group of nations reliant on the USA for protection. Who says so? Our Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, who went grovelling before President Donald J. Trump after his cabinet voted and negotiated to give away, with reverse strings attached to the Chagos Islands, to a nation super friendly with our potentially most dangerous enemy ever, China. On top of this, our PM tells Trump he wants him to put American soldiers in Ukraine to act as a buffer zone against Russian aggression, which will engage British and European infantry that he and his buffoon friends in the EU are contemplating sending in. Thus, Starmer is strengthening the potential of a Red Army as an enemy whilst concentrating on solely depleted defence force against Russia. Strategic thinking doesn't appear to be one of Sir Keir's strong points. But how did our defence of the realm forces become so depleted of numbers, equipment and morale? Now we must remember our morale is so low in the British Army and in the British country, I would say. Well, let's look at our intelligence gathering hub, the GCHQ. Put together in August 1914 and originally named the Government Code and Cyber School, it would later be renamed the GCHQ, which we all have heard of. Over the course of the First World War, signals intelligence provided valuable insight into enemy plans, so much so that when peacetime crystallised, this crypto-analytic unit was formed in 1919 to continue the mission during peace times. Good, because we needed it again a few years later, didn't we? With the Second World War. In November, it was the 1st of November actually, in 1919, within a year of the end of the war, the First World War, the separate naval and military intelligence organisations had merged to become the Government Code and Cipher School, GC and CS. It was GCHQ's, lots of letters here, original name. Its overt function was to protect British government communications with a secret mission to decrypt messages sent by foreign countries under the leadership of the very first director of GCHQ, which was Alistair Denison. When we look forward in history to 2015, so we've gone from 1919, when it was first commissioned officially as the GCHQ. So when we look at 2015, there's an alliance. The GCHQ, I'm going slow for this, with an organisation, the alliance with an organisation that has no place in our military thinking. This is my interpretation, my understanding. It had no place to have this alliance in our military thinking, whether it be intelligence gathering or actual fighting in defence of Britain and the world order. That alliance was with Stonewall. You heard of Stonewall? Stonewall is an organisation that furthers the intent of the lesbian, homosexual, bisexual, transsexual, and plus whatever all these initials they've got at the end, advocacy group. It is the group that, it infiltrated. It was allowed in. It was invited in to our intelligence gathering to bring diversity, equity and inclusion. This has gone on for 10 years, this alliance, and it's just stopped. Well, we think it's just stopped because Donald Trump, President of America, has put pressure on Britain and it seems that the influences of Stonewall in 2025 have been cut. We'll see. We'll see. I find that some of these organisations, they seem to be cut, but they're still there. They just change the names, or they don't, or they go secret. The damage done by these so-called ideas of diversity, equity and inclusion, they're untold. But the damage to morale that accompanied such moves as DEI within the armed forces is yet to be tested in battle. Yeah. These DEI moves are continuing even now by Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. You know what they're doing? They're busy removing the portraits of Churchill, Nelson, Thatcher, Queen Elizabeth, and among others, from the walls of our institutions, our government institutions. What are they replacing them with? Are they replacing them? Yes, they are. They're replacing them with a picture of Yvette Cooper, an unknown woman, and Ellen Wilkinson. Now, I'd never heard of Ellen Wilkinson. I had to look it up. An early member of Britain's Communist Party. They have taken away Churchill and Queen Elizabeth and Thatcher and replaced with an early member of the British Communist Party. This is supposed to be our government. And it's all part of their efforts to boost gender and ethnic diversity. Our national debt is ever growing, despite the efforts of our Chancellor of the Exchequer. What do they call her? Angela of Accounts, something like that. Which have made our potential recovery from debt even more remote, with hikes in the employer national insurance, which makes hiring of workers far less likely and far more likely to result in the dismissal rather than hiring. You know, if the employers are finding that it's getting expensive to employ people, they'll invest in machinery that does automatic machinery or do it for themselves. Could this idea of the the employer national insurance hike, putting people out of jobs, and we're seeing on the high street stores just closing down. Major retail stores are closing down in our city centres. You've seen it yourself, because they can't afford the higher cost of employing people. And if you can't employ them, then you can't open your shops. Pubs are closing, inns are closing, shops are closing. How are we going? How is this making Britain more financially secure? It's not. It's not. I think, and I'm saying here, could this be a covert ploy to encourage out-of-work young men and women to join our armed forces? They can't get a job, so join the army, join the navy, join the air force. If so, Britain will have to start investing great sums of money into military equipment. A sorely abandoned idea over the years, since the 1980s, Cold War ended, when President Mikhail Sergeyevich Gorbachev began dismantling the Soviet Union, Soviet Russian, what was it? SSUR, it's a Soviet, he dismantled it, and we started dismantling our armed services, as did Europe, and now we're finding Putin invades Crimea, wins it, he's invaded Ukraine, and he's took great swathes of Ukraine, and he's defending, and he's moving forward again, and we can't do a thing about it. So, boots on the ground and even new fighting equipment cannot make up for our army's disillusioned, lacking morale. Uniformed soldiers not really understanding why they're there on the battlefield. They don't really understand. They see the news, Putin's invaded Ukraine, Zelensky's going asking for money and military equipment, but they're not being told, why did Putin invade Ukraine, what's going on, they're not told. After being inundated during their formative years with false propaganda, this is the youth. They've over the years of schooling and the news on the radio and on the television and on wherever they go, they have been inundated during their formative years with false propaganda. Of truth is subjective, not objective. That you are what you feel, not who you were born with. That the British history is a story of colonisation and colonialism, which we should be ashamed of. That being white makes us have an unearned privilege, of which we should apologise. For morale is sadly lacking. It's missing in our youth today, because it's been they're like the mushroom with the board over them. They're kept in the dark. They're told that they should apologize. If they're white, they're told they should apologise, be apologetic. If they're male, they should be apologise. They should be apologetic. If they've got a good home, they should apologise. Why? Why should they apologise for being born a certain colour? Propaganda from a Marxist regime that hid itself under different names, Labour, Socialist, but Marxist nevertheless. Perhaps I'll talk about that in a little bit later. Our morals have taken a deep dive into our abyss of despair. Thus the increases in street crime, knife crime, muggings, rapes, sexual assaults, thefts. That moral decline came fast on the heels of diversity, equity and inclusion, on the heels of the daft idea of political correctness. Going back into the early 60s when I was at school, a blackboard was no longer called a blackboard, even though it was black. It was renamed a chalkboard, and later it was replaced by a whiteboard, which for an unknown reason to me was not considered wrong to call a whiteboard, but it was wrong to call a blackboard a blackboard. Yes, confusing, because it is not. There is no reason for not calling a board that's black, and a whiteboard that's called a whiteboard, and a green board. In Canada, they went to green boards and not blackboards. For some idiotic reasoning of a white person who said blackboards could upset black people. Yeah. I'll let you in on a secret. It may not be a secret, but my wife from 1972 to 1996, she died of a brain tumour, but from 72 to 96 was black. She was from Jamaica. She was an immigrant into Britain. A wonderful, wonderful woman. I still miss her. I still dearly miss her. She didn't understand why a blackboard couldn't be called black. And when we had our first child, 1977, she bought him a doll, a rag doll. It was called a gollywog. Some of you may remember them, gollywogs. She heard that she was being racist because she'd bought a gollywog for her child. Tell me about it. She did not understand how a doll that was black in face could be racist. Stupid, yes. But I've broken away from my point here, haven't I? Britain has floundered in a mire of its own making due to the lack of a backbone in not standing up against the Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels ideas espoused in their Communist Manifesto. It's all from communism. We now have a Prime Minister who sat down with Trump and Vance to declare Britain has a long history of freedom of speech, and long will it remain so. So when freedom of thought, freedom to write, freedom to vocalise are currently being stopped by police arrests, knocks on our doors early in the morning for something we said or wrote, or in some cases what we thought in our own minds in the street. Why then, if freedom is been long history and long will it remain, as Starmer said in America, in the White House, to the President and the Deputy President of the United States, and he said it would long remain, freedom of speech would long remain. Why are we getting knocks on our door? Because we've said something, or we've written something, or we've requoted something, or reposted something, or we've thought in our own heads. Well, I'll leave that one up to you. If we're not allowed to think, to give voice to our thoughts, what are we expected to fight for? If Starmer wants to put soldiers, and the rest of Europe wants to put soldiers in Ukraine to fight with the Russians, to fight against the Russians, not with them, what are they expected to be fighting for? Freedom, is it? Are we fighting for freedom? It is fast being taken away from us at home. What, therefore, is the fight for abroad in a foreign land? You know, if you haven't got freedom at home, why are you fighting for freedom abroad? In the past two great wars, World War I and II, Britain stood firm. I remember my father. He was too old to go to war in the Second World War. He was too young for the First World War, and he was too old for the Second World War. And he had a job which was essential for Britain's fight against. So he stayed and worked all day, and at night he was a fire warden, putting out fires from the bombs that bombed us. I stopped. I was just thinking of the heroics that these people did. These people that were considered too old to go to war, but fought the war at home, putting fires out and risking dangers from falling bombs and from falling buildings upon them. So please forgive me for a moment. Britain stood firm and strong, with little to fight for. We hadn't got that much arms. We'd done it again. We stopped investing in our arms to protect ourselves. But we came together. We came together because we knew we were fighting for freedom. If we cannot express those freedoms any longer, for fear of that knock on the door, then our fighting morale will not be manifested, and our freedoms will be gone forever. Please give me your comments. Place your comments in the comments section. If you're happy with these short, brief postings, then press the like button. But don't forget, for me to keep going, I need your subscriptions. So please subscribe. There is a subscribe button there. Just press it. It doesn't cost you a penny. It doesn't cost you a cent. It doesn't even cost you a rupee. It's totally free. So please, if you will, press the subscribe button. No cost to you. So what I want to do now is wish you well, wish you a good day, and wish you a goodbye. So until my next broadcast, and they're coming swift and furious. So there's so much happening in the world. So until the next one, bye-bye.